All right, interesting topic today. I just want to give you a disclaimer on the front end. If you are offended by the bow chicka wow wow, you might want to click off on this video. Bow chicka wow wow is the word we're going to use. I think you know what I'm talking about. On today's episode of the Lido Loca cruise show, we're going to talk about 10 things to avoid on a cruise ship if you are easily offended by the bow chicka wow wow. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Lido Loca cruise show. I'm your host, Tony B. I am your guide for that journey into the cruise life today. If you enjoy cruising content, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of our episodes. Well, first and foremost, I'm not here to make fun of or to give a hard time to people that are offended. We all are raised differently. The people come from different faiths. People have different moral standards. And there are going to be some things out there that offend people that don't offend other people. And people get offended about different things from all walks of life. Videos like this tend to fill the comments with people that say politically motivated things, but none of it's about that. It's really about people who are offended when they go on the cruise ship. I've been tracking a couple news stories, one from last year and one more recently, about people that got offended on cruise ships where other people weren't offended. And these were things that kind of revolved around, bow chicka wow wow, naughty behavior. There was a couple recently that felt like their cruise was ruined because they attended the Quest game show on their cruise and they felt like what they saw bordered on being pornographic, and it ruined their cruise. And then a famous story from last year, there was a couple ladies completely offended by the language used in the adult comedy show. So this really is a public service announcement. If you are somebody who is offended in that way, offended by the bow chicka wow wow, no judgment, but I do want to tell you 10 things to avoid on the cruise ship so that you don't have to deal with it. Okay, so that's really my heart in this thing, is to give some information out and maybe help people that are worried avoid something that might offend them. Start with the big one. It is the Quest game show. This show is labeled as an adult game show, and you're going to see a lot of stuff. It's going to be PG-13 style nudity. You're going to see simulated bow chicka wow wow acts. You're going to, it's going to run the gamut. You're going to see people dressing up not according to their sex or gender. All bets are off. It's a late night show, and in that show you will see some crazy stuff. If you are offended by those kind of things, you want to avoid the Quest game show. If you are offended by the bow chicka wow wow, you might want to avoid love and marriage shows. Love and marriage, kind of a take on the Newlywed Game, where the cruise line will pull 3 couples up on stage. They'll ask them questions and see if they can match each other's answers. And inevitably there'll be questions about where was the first place or the strangest place you made whoopee. And at least once during every show, there is some lady who complains about the size of her man's utility belt. Let's call it that. And so if those kind of things offend you, you might want to stay away from the love and marriage show. Depending on the cruise line, there are other shows called the Gender Showdown, sometimes the Battle of the Sexes. The Battle of the Sexes not as much in the bow chicka wow wow as the Gender Showdown, but in those shows you may see some sort of simulated bow chicka wow wow activity. There's definitely going to be racy conversations. That might be something that you want to avoid. And then number 4 is the adult comedy show. Comedians have carte blanche for the most part to talk about anything. And one of the things that people like to hear comedians joke about is the bow chicka wow wow. So there definitely will be some crude humor around naughtiness. And look, okay, we're only 4 in on the list. I can hear the people screaming already. Let me scream for you. Many of these activities will come with their own disclaimer. Anybody that gets mad at the Quest, I think, is out of line, okay? Again, no judgment on people that get offended, but if you're the person that goes there, you sit through the announcement that says this is going to be offensive, and then you watch the whole thing, and then you get mad, I think you're out of line. The cruise line does a really good job at putting disclaimers in front of these things that have the bow chicka wow wow. It's such a crazy society that we live in. We celebrate violence, violent movies, our sports are sometimes violence, no problem with that. But you get a little into the bow chicka wow wow and everybody loses their mind. That's Okay, that's a sidebar. That's just me. Again, there are going to be things that offend people, and the cruise line does a good job of saying this could be offensive. Adult comedy could be offensive. The Quest game show could be offensive. They tell you that right at the beginning. Get your kids out of here, and if you are not into this kind of thing, get out of here. And I think after those announcements come down, and if you stay, then I don't really think you can argue. You got to run away from the things that offend you if that is the way it goes. Okay, so back to the list. Number 5. There are places on the cruise ship that people walk around with their skin exposed. So if you're somebody who struggles or maybe tempted by seeing bare skin by either sexes, you might want to avoid the pool area. You might want to avoid the Lido deck. You will see men in Speedos. You'll see women in tiny bikinis. You will see a lot of flesh if you go onto the Lido deck. If that's something that you struggle with, you might want to avoid that. And then formal night's another one. A lot of times when we dress up to the nines, showing off some of the flesh is a component of that. Curvy dresses, tight-fitting suits for men, and sometimes some exposed skin. So if you're somebody that struggles that way, tempted that way, offended that way, you may have to avoid the Lido deck, and you may have to avoid formal night. Another place where you may run into some bawdy humor, some bow chicka wow wow humor is late night at the piano bar. When the hour gets late, the second show at the piano bar, that's another one of those no holds barred kind of places where all topics are on the table. Well, they'll joke about the bow chicka wow wow, they'll make innuendo, all that kind of stuff, and they'll use language. So if you're offended by language, if you're offended by innuendo, you might want to avoid the late night piano bar. There are some activities that happen on the Lido deck just outside of the regular people being at the pool. The hairy chest contest is a good example. This is a contest where they'll pull people up out of the crowd that have a hairy chest. They'll pull a bunch of dudes up, they'll pull up a bunch of ladies, and the ladies will judge the dudes. And that whole interaction, a lot of it is hairy men gyrating on innocent looking women or kind of risque women rubbing up on the chest of the hairy man. There's a lot of bow chicka wow wow tension. That's part of what makes that show appealing. But if that's not something that you're into, that's a spot where you might be offended and that you might not want to go to that. Talking about places where there's some bow chicka wow wow tension, the nightclub, clubbing in general is one of those things. Clubbing is an activity where you go and get close to other people and dance to the rhythmic moves of music and lighting and all that kind of stuff. You know, I've been to silent disco on a cruise ship and you see people dancing. It could be a little suggestive. It could be a little, you know, bow chicka wow wow tension. And so if that's one of those things that bugs you, you might want to avoid it. And you even run the risk at the stage shows. Many of the cruise lines, they fill up their stage shows with very athletic dancers and singers, and the entertainment sometimes revolves around suggestive dancing, or it revolves around showing off skin. There's a lot of things that go into it. You know, that could be a stretch. I'm just putting it on the list just so if you're somebody that struggles with those kind of things, suggestive dancing, those kind of things, you might run into that at the stage show. Now, I've also seen some bow chicka wow wow tension happening at the $10 sale. I've seen more than one lady's eyes light up in a way that I've only seen a few times in my life over $10 purses. And to be fair, likewise, I was on the cruise ship during the World Series and I saw some men excited in ecstasy over, those are just jokes, okay? I don't think anybody's getting offended over the purse sales or the World Series. Just a little humor to round it out. All right, let's check the pulse. Is everybody okay out there? Did we make it through? Anybody offended? What's some other things you see on a cruise ship that are offensive? That should be interesting in the comments. I did do a video on the ladies that got bummed out over the adult comedy. I will leave a link to that. Check that video out, and there's more videos linked in the description. Watch another Lido Loca video. My name's Tony B for the Lido Loca Cruise Show, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.